Hi there, I'm Katrina, and today I'm going to be demonstrating the network knot, which aims to connect the three VMs of Windows, Mac, and Fedora Linux together into one network, and it uses the Windows VM as an internet proxy. To start, I'm going to be showing the unique network I made through VMware Workstation. This will be used with all three of the VMs, and it is VMnet 2 to host only using the IP of 192.168.30.0. It's not NAT or bridged, it's host only, and it's not connected to the local DHCP service. The Windows will have two networks. One will be NAT, which will be the internet, and the other one will be the VMnet 2, which is the host only, which will connect all three of the VMs. The Mac and Linux will only have the VMnet 2 as their network. We look at the settings. So the Windows has two adapters. One is the custom VMnet 2, and the second one is NAT to get the internet. And my Mac and Linux, they only have the one network, the custom VMnet 2. So same with over Fedora, custom VMnet 2. And I'm just going to be looking at the command prompt here. And we're going to look at the IPs that we have. So looking here, we have our 10.20.3.1. That is our VMnet 2 network. That is the one that is connected through all three of them. And then this one here, the 192.168.10.150, that is the one connected to the internet. So the two other VMs connects to the Windows, and they take the internet from the Windows here. The changes of this were made through the Windows registry editor. I'm just going to take a look over at the Mac, look over at their terminal. So looking at the Mac, it only has the one network, the 10.20.30.38. That was given by the Windows VM, and it was given within the 10.20.30 range. Next, if we look at Fedora, ignore this stuff here. This will be going over more about that soon. And you can see here the network 10.20.30.149. So again, it's within the 10.20.30 range. So if I go on Firefox on Fedora, I can look up anything because I get internet from the Windows VM. Same with the Mac, I can go to Safari, and I also get internet from the Windows server. Next, I'll be using the Cups PDF printer that I configured in Linux. So I'm going to be printing out two test pages, one on Mac, one on Windows. So first we're going to go with Mac. So we have it displayed on already here, the printers and scanners. Where to find this is the Apple system settings, and then you just scroll down to the bottom here with printers and scanners. And you can see here we have the Cups PDF at the Fedora VM. That's idle, it's ready to go. So we're just going to be going and printing a test page. Click on this, look at printer queue, and we're going to go print a test page from up here. So it's printing, it's looking for the printer, connecting to the printer. And we're going to hop over to the Fedora Linux. So it says printing, the test print on Cups PDF. So we're going to go back over to the terminal, printing complete, so it's a promising sign. You're just going to be using lpstat, look at what was completed. And these are some of my previous ones, but the PDF4, which is just that I printed right now at 11:55 at today's date, so that went through. So I'm just going to be printing from Windows next. So I'm just going to print off, say this. Right click, print. Then we're going to hop over to the Fedora Linux and see if it's printed. You can see here PDF5, and it was from 11:56. So that was when we just printed off Windows. It went through, completed, perfect. Alright, so now that the printer has printed from both the Mac and Windows, I am now going to be showing file sharing between all three. On Windows, my share folder right now is Windows Test, so anything in here will be shared to my Mac and my Linux VMs. So since I already tested, test is over there with the Mac and Fedora, I'm just going to create a new one, and we're just going to go take a look over at Mac. Let's go up here, connect to server. So we're going to connect, this is one is for our Linux, this one down here is for our Windows Test, so that's one we're going to be using to connect. So we see here, this was our folder that we just shared with test.txt and testing practice that we just created .text. Next, we're going to go over to Fedora and we're going to go see the file that was created over there. Okay, to see the shared folder from the Windows VM to the Linux VM, you have to have root permissions, so sudo mount cifs. Then you use the IP address from the Windows VM and the name of the shared folder, and it's going to be mounted to the Windows share folder that I created on the Linux itself to hold the files from my Windows test folder for my Windows VM. And then quickly what we have to do is ls and Windows share, which is what we had mounted the share folder to. And you can see within there, you can see the testing practice, which we had from the Windows, and the test.txt. So that is sharing from Windows to Mac and Fedora. So while we're here, I might as well show how I share a file from my Linux VM to my Mac and Windows VM. So we're going to create file, which I created for the Linux shared folder. And so we can see here, Linux test was my other one I used to confirm, and then testing Linux is the one I just created. So that's all we need to do in Linux right now. So it's going to go to Mac, and we're going to take a look at the shared folder from Linux. And we are just going to be clicking on this one here. This is for the Linux. This was the Linux IP address, and then shared folder was the name of the folder within the configuration, and the path of the shared folder is to our Linux shared. So we're just going to connect. And so we can see here the shared folder from our Linux, which is Linux test, the old one I had used, and testing Linux, the new one I had just created. Alright, next we're going to hop over to Windows and do the same thing over there. So for Windows, all you have to do is type here, 2 backslashes, then you have to have the IP of the Linux VM up top here. That was 149, and see it already has here shared folder, which is the shared folder we want to see, which has our 2 text files. And so we see here Linux test and testing Linux, the one we just created today. So that works perfectly. Finally, for the shared folders, we hop over to Mac, and we're going to share our Mac folder to Linux and Windows. So this is the one we'll be using to share to Windows and Linux. So we have a couple of files right here, which I've already shared over to the other one, so I'm just going to have to create a new one. Right, now that I've created the file here, this is the new one. So we're going to share this folder with Windows and Fedora, and we should see all 4 of these there. So we're going to go to Fedora first, and the Mac one, we just use ls mac share, since the Mac one I had mounted just before this. This is what I had done earlier, just to mount the shared file from the Mac to the Linux. And you can see all 4 of the test files. This is the new one just created, and we were able to share it from the Mac to the Linux. Finally, we are going to share from our Mac to our Windows, and it's the same thing as we did with the Linux. This is the double backslash, the IP address, and the name of the folder, which pops up here, and it's going to be Mac OS test. And you can see the text files popping up here, the new one we created, as well as the other 3 that I had created earlier. Okay, now I'm going to show you the screen sharing between all 3. I did try remote desktop from Windows, but unfortunately every time I tried, it would not go through with at least the Linux. But what I was able to get to work was TeamViewer. I was able to connect with each of the VMs from using that. So here you're each given your own ID with your own password. Right now I'm going to connect with the Mac one. So its ID is this right here. So its ID is right here. So that's what I'm going to be using in the Windows, which actually I already have here from when I last tried it. So we're just going to connect, and now we are in the Mac right here. So it's pretty cool. We're able to remote desktop within the Mac from Windows VM no less. It's like a turducken in a way. Alright, so I'm just going to exit out that. And next we are going to go over to the Fedora's team viewer. So we're going to go over to activities. Since I already have it installed on the GUI, I'll just be using that. I installed it using the terminal, but it's just a little bit easier using the GUI. So this is the ID here. This is what I'll be using for my Windows. And then typically for my Linux, it's been asking me for the password, so I'll just keep that in mind as well. Right, so we have the ID from the Linux. And we're just gonna have over Fedora for a quick second because it's having a little pop-up here for my remote desktop, so we're gonna allow remote interaction and other windows over the VM. We can see we are in the Linux VM right now. So if it takes a bit too long sometimes, it just means you might have to go over to your VM that you're trying to get into and then just accept a request from allowing it to a remote desktop in. Alright, we're going to exit out here, and we are going to be doing the same thing from our Mac to our Windows and Linux, and then from our Linux to our Windows and Mac. Now that we are in the Mac VM, we are just going to go over to the Fedora Linux, because the password does change every time you use it. So we got a new password, and so that's what we're going to have to enter when we connect. And we're just going to go back over to Fedora and allow it the remote interaction, and we're going to share our screen. And now that we're in the Mac VM, we can see we are in our Linux VM as well. So to connect to Windows, we are just going to be using the ID, obviously, from the Windows team viewer. Okay, so now that I have the ID, I'm just going to connect. And I am in Windows. Right, now I'm just going to exit out of that one, and we're going to go over to Fedora, and we're going to connect from Fedora to Mac and Windows. Since Windows was the last one we connected on Mac, I just used the same ID. We'll connect to that first. And here we are on Windows from our Linux VM. Here's the Mac TeamViewer ID, so I'm just going to connect to that one here. And we can see that it's up and running from the Mac on our Linux VM. At the beginning I had a bit of an issue with a black screen from Mac from both my Linux and Windows, but luckily that was able to be fixed, and so we can clearly see the Mac VM from both our Windows and our Linux. Finally, I'm going to be showing you the bash script I created to schedule file backups from the Linux to Mac and Windows. So this is what my script was called, backup script, and we're going to look inside here. So this is where the source is coming from. So it's going to be taking all of the files created in test files, and on the Windows it's going to be going to Windows backup, and then the Mac, it's going to be going to the Mac backup. It is also going to create a timestamp with the date, going year, month, day, and then hour, minute, second. The log file it creates will be going into the backup.log. This is what performs the backup to the Windows, and then, so if it's completed successfully, it goes that. If not, it goes to backup to Windows failed. Those will all go into the log file, whether it backs up or not. Same thing with the Mac. Alright, so now that we've gone through the backup script, I'm just going to show you how I've done the scheduling to do every hour. And as a test, I'm just going to change it so it goes every minute, so we can just show that the schedule works. So to start, I'm just going to be adding a new text file into our test files, which is where the script takes the files from and it backs it up. It goes to the Mac and the Windows. So we're just going to create this new one. And I'm just going to quickly show in the cron tab here, so we can see that schedule is supposed to go to every hour, because this 0 here is related to the minutes. So every time the minutes are 00, it will run the backup. For the other stars, I'm not exactly sure. I know there's days, there's weeks, there's hours, there's seconds. just to do a test of the scheduling, instead of waiting the 5 minutes here just for it to be end up in 00. Just gonna change this to another star, so that will run for every minute. Okay, so now that the minute has passed, we're just gonna go take a look, and you can see in the Mac here, we can see the file we just created, so it had run from the minute that we had said. Now that we're back in Windows, backup test, that was where we put our backups for our from Linux to Windows, and you can see here we got our text file that we just got from our Linux. So if I had left it back in for the 0 instead of the star, it would run every hour. So at 1 o'clock, in a couple minutes, it would run. And that is everything for today. I've had a good time working on this project. It was very interesting seeing how they all work together, seeing all the different configurations, and just how different each operating system is was just really cool to see. It's really cool to figure out, especially Linux. With only this other class that we've had, I've never used it before. Mac, I've had some experience because of our desktop, and Windows I've had the most experience with, considering that's my laptop and my desktop at school. So thank you for listening. Have a good day.